Welcome to another episode of the PS We Expire podcast. I'm Morgan Motzinger, and this is episode 8. My guest today is Shannon Swanson, and Shannon, we had such a wonderful conversation. Shannon is a therapist, she is a health coach and a personal trainer, and she really has such a passion for helping women to bust out of their limiting beliefs, their unhealthy patterns, and change their ways of thinking to be able to create a life that they love. So please enjoy my conversation today with Shannon Swanson. So Shannon, can you please tell us about your early career experience, and then we'll talk about this transition that you had. I'll prep our listeners a little bit. Shannon and I connected on Instagram as both of us talked about mental health, as we talked about this mind-body connection, as we talked about what it looks like to live in alignment. And Shannon has a beautiful coaching business now after a long career in the mental health space. And so I want, as we talk about this transition for her today, the reason why I'm sharing this with all of you, you beautiful listeners, is because I want you to have not only some tangible tips on how to get in touch with yourself, but also what you do when these transitions into understanding what you truly want can be very difficult and painful. And so we want to give some practical insight into how to find the courage to move forward into those things. So Shannon, go ahead and talk to us a little bit about what your background is and how you got into that field, and what led up to you really understanding that it was time to change.
Well, I had always, like when I was in high school, I was always interested in psychology and didn't think too much of it. Anyway, fast forward, I'm in college, and I took a very kind of twisty path to get to where I was. So I was really unsure. I didn't really know what I wanted to do. And through a series of events, I ended up working in the juvenile justice system for a while. And I ended up getting an associate's degree at a community college for a hot second. And I had to do an internship at our local juvenile justice center and fell in love working with kids. And then I was completely focused. So I got my bachelor's degree, and then I worked at a residential facility for boys for about 5 years, which I loved. I absolutely loved it. And then, so then I got to a point where it's like, okay, I can't really do much more skill wise. I need to get my master's degree. So I decided to be a therapist, went back to school. And through that, I had to do internships, and ended up doing an internship where I ended up working for 20 years, which was a place for children's mental health, which is something, we had something called psychiatric day treatment. And that is where children who are really struggling behaviorally and emotionally in school, in a public school, and outpatient services aren't working. And they're expressing a lot of behavior. So they're physically aggressive, they have emotional outbursts, struggling on all levels, struggling in terms of their ability to, learn because of all of the trauma. They would be referred to our agency. And so we had something called psychiatric day treatment, like I said, where we would have a treatment milieu, and then they would come and have their therapeutic services in addition to education. And so I did that, became a director, and then in the end, but my last 7 years, I think I was there, I was a quality assurance director. And so I was not happy in that position. I liked the job. I was good at that part of the job, but I knew deep down, it's like, this isn't why I went into the field. I went into the field to help people. And I really hadn't tapped into why yet, but I knew I wanted to help kids. And I think what I always, and truly being in the therapy room with a child still to this day is one of my biggest joys. Because one of the questions I would always ask a child when we were sitting down for the first time is, why do you think you are here? Like, what is why do you think you're here? I know what all the adults have told me, but what do you think? And I would say 9 times out of 10, they would say, because I'm bad.
Oh.
And it would just kill me. And so I always had this goal, when I worked with children, is to help them understand, and it's kind of what I do today, but with women, is to help them understand you are not your experiences. You are not
Hmm.
the abuse that has happened to you. Sorry, my dog is barking. You are not, you are not all of those things. You are so much more than that. You're not the stories. You're
Hmm.
a child who's been hurt. During that time when I was working as a QA, I had something happen with my hormones. So I was going through the whole process of menopause and changing.
Hmm.
And then I had a moment where I was really suffering. I go to the doctor, I get diagnosed with hypothyroid. Then, because I was able to find out how to heal myself, I then was really encouraged to look into health coaching. And then I became a
Hmm.
health coach. And then I talked about hormones. And so that's what led me to the coaching. And I was kind of doing that on the side as I continued to work. But I continue to feel more and more miserable in my position as a quality assurance director,
Hmm.
because I knew I wasn't in my purpose. I think deep down, I didn't come into the field to do data and look at paperwork. I wanted to
Hmm.
help humans. And so I ended up being let go from that position and left the agency. And it was a blessing. And I just saw it at that time, and this is what I talk about now, is the universe was saying, you have been miserable for this long, you're meant to go do this, and we're
Hmm.
going to arrange it. So you are basically forced out of this. You need to go, you need to go this direction. And so then I started my health coaching business, and then the last couple of years hit around, 2020, and I was focusing on the health coaching business and doing that while I was working from home. And then I had a series of events happening where I became estranged from my family, realized that my mother was a narcissist, and which I had never really looked at and hadn't faced. And so I was just faced with my life basically falling apart. So
Hmm.
lost my job, my family became estranged from my family. Then my marriage, I started to have to face my marriage, that it was falling apart too. And then I kind of had I had this thing happen to me last year where it kind of like brought me to my knees and woke me up,
Hmm.
um to where it's like, are you really looking at the reality of your life? Are you looking at the spiritual side, which I've always been spiritual, but it really woke me up in an entirely different way. And so I decided at the beginning of 2022 to really focus on um, the more spiritual side and weaving that in. And so
Hmm.
I had this moment where I was like, okay, in terms of your health coaching business and helping women, what is the common thread in your entire career? Like, what is it that you really want to do? And what it comes down to is, when I thought about my work with kids and what the real reason I became a health coach is, I want to help women believe in themselves and trust
Hmm.
themselves, reconnect with themselves and live their authentic truth and stop living for everyone else.
Hmm.
Shut out the noise, come back to yourself, and stop putting everyone first. Are
Hmm.
you really happy in your relationship? Are you really fulfilled in your career? Are you really putting yourself first in your needs? Because what are we always told as women? In fact, what's interesting, an interesting point, I was doing some research and I was creating some content, and I looked up, if you look up the term self-love and Google it, the
Hmm.
definition, and you get synonyms for it, you should read it. Selfishness,
Hmm.
self-centeredness, it's all of these really negative words. And I thought that's really interesting. And that's been the message. So
Hmm.
for women in particular, in order to be a good partner, a good mother, a successful mother, successful at your job, you have to give all of yourself. But if
Hmm.
you want to put yourself first, you are selfish, you are self-centered, you are undeserving, all these negative ways
Hmm.
that we look at that. And I just think that's ridiculous. And so I also want to change that belief for women, that you get to put yourself first. You get to live your life the way you want to live it, period.
Hmm.
So that's kind of me in a nutshell.
Thank you so much for sharing all of that. I want to, something that you said when you were talking about your experience as a therapist with children, I really want to come back to, because I think that it's, and I love how much this ties closely with where you ended with this point of self-love. So you said that with children, you would ask them, why do you think you're here? And the response so often, 90% of the time, was because I'm bad. So I'm curious about the work that you do with women now in this space, and the work that I believe the work that a lot of people are doing when they're actually having deep connection and success with their clients or their patients, is when they're addressing that part of people that is still that child that says, I'm bad. So, because if you believe at your core that you are bad, then that taints what you believe about your intentions. It taints what you believe about your motivations. It makes you unable to trust yourself, because why would you trust somebody who's bad and has bad intentions and bad motivations? So it is absolutely imperative to address that part of ourself that feels like I'm bad. And the beautiful thing about self-love is that, like you said, it's not that self-love results in selfishness or these narcissistic tendencies, because true self-love cannot be those things. It is an antithesis of those. Self-love is, I understand my connectedness to all things, and the way that I see other people in their beauty and their humanity as doing the best that they can also is how I should believe about myself. And that as our relationships are mirrors, the judgment that we hold for ourselves, the loathing that we hold for ourselves, the ideas of the places that I'm lacking, whatever, we're always going to see those in other people. And so this lack of self-love not only is a hindrance to us having a deep, meaningful connection with ourselves that is that makes life feel worth living, but it also is a hindrance to our connection with other people, always. So I love this. I love this mission that you have now to help change the narrative around self-love, especially for women, and how wonderful your experience working with children will benefit the people that work with you now, because it is always addressing those childlike parts of ourselves that went through these things, and when we were little, we didn't know how to deal with them.
Exactly.
And so it's always this reparenting of ourselves as we dig into this world of self-awareness and introspection and self-love. When you said, go ahead.
Oh no, I just said 100% agree with you. Mm-hmm.
So when you were in that position where you shifted into this more managerial type role and you weren't working directly with clients anymore, I suspect that maybe you had an inkling that wasn't going to feel good when you first moved in that position, but you said you were in it for 7 years. So can we talk a little bit about why we stay in situations for so long that we know deep down are not satisfying to us or fulfilling or are really going to lead us in the direction that we really want to go? Why do we stay there so long?
I will tell you, for me, I think it really comes down to being distracted. We distract ourselves. And so I think, especially when you are a busy, I'll just speak for, because we're focused on women for this particular context, for women who, whatever your life looks like, whether it's a career and you're working really long hours and days and you're busy and you come home and you eat dinner, you go to bed and you get up and you kind of do the rinse and repeat. Same thing if you're a mother and you're working, or you're a mother and you've got many children or even one child and you're doing the best you can. You're focusing all of your attention on your family and whatever that is for you. The pace of life is so fast, and we're just doing rinse, repeat, and we're going. And we live in a world where we're kind of pushed in this kind of culture to go, that I think it's so easy for us to not even realize that that's what we're doing, and that we distract ourselves, because that's what happened to me. I distracted myself, and I think my true purpose, and moved further and further away from it because I was so focused on well, this is what I probably should be doing, and just working really long hours, and not really facing my life and what I really wanted. And so I don't even know if it was so much about fear, and maybe because when I think back to it, I don't even think it was so much about fear of wanting to change. It's more, I was so disconnected, totally disconnected. I was just like being on the hamster wheel every day, going, going, going. And then, you know, how fast time goes, then another day passes and another day passes. And pretty soon it's 3 years down the road. And then you're like, how did I get here? How did I get here? And then I think it's when you realize, it's when you at the point of awareness where you're like, whoa, how did I get here? Then that's when the fear kicks in. Because it was at that point for me where it was like, when you finally are aware of what's happening and how you've landed, and you stop one day and you go, oh my gosh, this is not what I wanted. This is not where I thought I would be. This is not where I thought I would end up. This is not the relationship I want. This is not the career I want. I don't want this. That's when you get scared because you're like, because it's scary to think, how did I get here? How did I go so many years on autopilot? Like, where was I? Why was I not the star of my show? Why was I not an engaged participant in my own freaking life? Like, where was I? And it's scary. And so that's kind of scary to realize that. And then the fear also kicks in around, okay, now because I know this, I can't run for myself knowing I have to now change it. And so how do I do that?
I think one of the most helpful things that I heard was anybody who gets to that point where they realize, where they have that moment of insight where they're like, this isn't what I want anymore. The power lies in the understanding that you have choice. Yes. When you can admit to yourself the things that aren't working anymore, or the things that you want to do, the things that you want to stop doing, that doesn't mean you have to do those things. It just means that you now understand that you have that personal power and that personal responsibility. So you may be able to admit to yourself, okay, I have this long career, this education that supports this long career. It's good. It's stable. I don't want to do it anymore. Just the awareness of I don't want to do it anymore doesn't mean that you don't have to. Because when you have that moment of awareness, you can go back to that career and change yourself and not have to change your circumstances. So I think that many people are afraid to admit when something is not working or when they want something different, because they think it means that they have to do something different. But the change doesn't happen out here. The change happens in here. And the most amazing part of what creates an extraordinary life is the things that we have control over, which is in here. So let's use this as a time to shift over into physiologically the hormone health, the mind-body connection. And I will say that, you know, for many people, this moment of understanding and clarity about our lives comes when we have a difficult circumstance, right? Because if things are smooth sailing or good enough, we're not going to ask ourselves these questions. So usually it takes something like a job loss, somebody that you love dies, your health goes to crap. And then you start to, it's like you wake up to your own mortality and say, like, blah, like this life that I'm living, how much of it do I have left? And do I want to continue to do the same things that I've been doing? So talk to me a little bit about how we, I guess how the universe gets our attention. And you touched a little bit on how that happened with you, like with being diagnosed with hypothyroidism. And can we talk about the mind-body connection and what that means for us when it comes to taking control of our lives?
So I started with this diagnosis, and then I was able to, because I was at this, it was really, you know, I believe there are no accidents ever. I believe the universe is always sending us some kind of clue, kind of a little nudge, kind of a tap, tap, tap. Hey, you might want to take a look at this over here. So when you see these synchronicities in the world, they're there for a reason. And so literally the day that I talked to my doctor and got the diagnosis, which literally I was told your thyroid's a little wonky and here's a pill to take, which was appalling to me. And when I actually said, well, why, how did this happen? Because at that point I knew nothing.
Hmm.
I was like, what happened to my thyroid? Why? Well, we don't know the root cause, which I thought was the strangest thing
Oh.
to say. We could never, I mean, it was literally said in a tone of like I was crazy. We don't know the cause. Like, how could we possibly know
Hmm.
that? And I thought, well, why did you go to medical school then? What am I missing?
Hmm.
And so at this, literally the same day, I was listening to this doctor on this, Dr. Joel Wallach on this radio station, who literally was talking about the thyroid
Hmm.
and was answering caller's question. And so he was explaining that your thyroid is connected to mainly gluten and what it does and autoimmunity and all of these things. And here's how you can heal it. You need to do X, Y, and Z. And so I thought, okay, I'm going to try that first and not do the medications. Well,
Hmm.
it worked. So I was able to heal myself, felt better than I had in years. It was a huge wake up call. And so then I was talking to everyone at work about it. Like, you really need to look at your stress. You need to look at the mind body connection and the toxins that we take in our bodies that actually do harm us. And so I was so propelled by this and so empowered by it. That's what led me. And what's interesting is that I remember, I don't even know what I was looking at, but I was on the internet and down below, I don't remember what website I was on. I must have been looking at something about thyroid or something. And down in the right-hand corner, I saw this little ad for become a health coach. And I was
Hmm.
like, what's that? And I remember clicking on it, and it was like literally everything I was thinking I wanted to do. And so then I went
Hmm.
back to school at the Institute for Integrative Nutrition, became a health coach, which led me to where I am now. But I think it's, the other piece that I'm now starting to talk about, which I haven't up until literally recently, is what I've come to learn. And this is kind of in addition to this and kind of explaining how my life shifted. And I think what's happening to a lot of people is that what I've learned, because let me go back for a second. So when I left my job, became a health coach, and then everything happened with COVID,
Hmm.
I was really had some things happen to me, which kind of brought me to my knees, had me look at my life in an entirely different way, to face myself, to face my life, realize how unhappy I was in my marriage.
Hmm.
Um, I was really requiring a lot of, it helped me move toward the spiritual. Because I was literally, to be perfectly honest and raw, I was literally having panic attacks. I never had a
Hmm.
panic attack in my life. I was not wanting to be here anymore.
Hmm.
Um, and just everything lost all meaning. And it wasn't really, really frightening. And so the only thing I could do was move toward God and the spiritual, and literally on my knees saying to God, please make the pain go away. I don't know what
Hmm.
to do. And so I got really delved into the spiritual to kind of help me figure out what's going on. And I guess I had a spiritual awakening. Which and when I looked that up, I was like, okay, this is exactly what
Hmm.
I'm going through. I felt I was crazy. I
Hmm.
lost interest in things that I'd never that I'd always loved.
Hmm.
I didn't care about like television, didn't care anymore. I used to sit and watch the housewives all the time and for hours at night and just kind of go to work, come home, eat dinner, watch TV, go to bed, repeat. And now I was like, that doesn't interest me anymore.
Hmm.
I was completely focused on the spiritual. I just wanted to like dive into it. I need to know, it was more me trying to figure out what is happening to me. And everything they tell you when you look up a spiritual awakening is what happened to me. I lost interest in things that I once loved. Ways of coping no longer worked. So I had to find new ways of coping. I came back to meditation, which was a lifesaver. And
Hmm.
just it completely shifted the way that I look at. It helped me shift the way I look at my own stuff, my own traumas in my
Hmm.
childhood, and that um, I had to really start to face pain and wounding and traumas that I'd never really looked at before. And it was a really painful process. Um, so, in the end, that's kind of what it brought me to. And so I had this moment where I'm like, and I lost interest in talking about hormones. I'm like,
Hmm.
I don't want to talk about this anymore. I'm not interested. It was like a total dead stop. I don't want to do this anymore.
Hmm.
And so I had to take a really long, hard look. And I thought, okay, what is at your core in terms of what you believe your purpose is on this planet? Look at everything you've ever done, from kind of who you were as a child, because I didn't like bullies and I was always the kid who stood up to the bullies and defended other kids at school, to becoming a therapist, and what was at the crux of why you were a therapist, what was at the heart of it, what gave you joy, and now why do you really want to be a coach and help women? And there was this common thread, and it is and if anyone out there, listeners, know about Enneagram at all, I am an 8. And 8s are very much wanting to help people stand up for themselves. And that's really kind of who I am. And so I just had this moment where I was like, that's it. That's what I want to do. I want to help women believe in themselves, reconnect with themselves, know their real true power. Like, we are so powerful, and men too, but as beings, just beings, we're more powerful than we know. And it makes me really, truly, genuinely emotional. Like, I hate to see people, particularly women, not know who they are and not believe in themselves. And you can do anything and stand up for yourself and fight for your life, fight for yourself. Like, don't just lay down and allow people to treat you the way you don't want to be treated, and just allow your life to pass you by. Like, you have so many gifts and you are so important, and I want everyone to believe that. It's so big for me. And lastly, I'll say, is a big piece of my work is to really help people to stop believing the stories that they have either had created for them or participated in about who they believe they are based on childhood. So as children, we really take that in. So when we have parents who've had their own trauma, parented the best way that they know how, however, they're doing it through the lens of being traumatized and having their own stuff, because what we say, what is that expression, like when I was a therapist, is that, how do you get what you weren't given? And so half the time we're not even aware of what we haven't been given. So how do you know how to go get it if you don't know you have it? And then when you realize you don't have it, where do you get it from? And so, it's really diving into that and realizing that if you can, I want to help people try to see their life from a completely different perspective, and make yourself and understand you are the objective observer of your life, that you are not the stories, you are not your experiences, you are not the things that people have told you you are not the ways people try to define you. You are not the boxes people try to put you in. You are a soul living a human experience. You are so much more than that. And if you can look at it that way, then you can start to, like, if you really, because I think awareness is the biggest piece, is kind of what I do in my membership, is awareness is always the first place we start. And that's really shifting your perspective to look at your life and yourself and your beliefs about yourself from an objective place. So then you don't have that added layer of shame, because we're taught in this world that our defense mechanisms, when we're triggered, are really who we are. Because when we express defense mechanisms, then what usually happens is that people respond to us when those are being expressed. So you'll often get, criticized and told, so if you are angry, out of defense, if you shut down, out of defense, if you, whatever it looks like, we get reactions from people when we express those. And then that reaction we internalize, which then we believe is who we are. And so it's really kind of teasing these things out and really trying to look at ourselves as these pure, beautiful souls who are here just simply living a human experience. And what are you supposed to learn from those experiences? It's not who you are, but what are you supposed to learn from it so you grow and you become and step into the person you're meant to be?
I love that so much. So something that you said when you were talking about your transition was that you got to such a low point that the question that you were asking yourself and asking whoever would listen was, how do I make the pain go away?
Mm-hmm.
And I do believe that that is something that people kind of operate on unconsciously, and that sometimes people really do think, how do I make the pain go away? And it's exactly the way that the majority of people do that is exactly the way that you talked about earlier, and it's by being distracted. So
Yeah.
what
Mm-hmm.
is fed to us as the appropriate way to be like this, is to kind of move through life with not too many highs, not too many lows. That's easy to predict. That's easy to control. So if you think about children, like especially, oh man, I think about my little guy, Luke, when he was, 2, 3 years old, we used to say that he would get upset and he would hulk out, because it would be this extreme display of emotion of like things were just going fine, and then it would be like like bursting out of his clothes kind of thing and just raging, and then he would be fine again. And this is the nature of being a human, because our bodies are containers for emotion. So emotions
Right.
cannot be felt without a body, because emotions are a vibration in our body. So if we think about what is expected of us, what is rewarded is being very do, and what that means is being predictable, being numb to life. But as Brene Brown has said in much of her work around shame, is that you cannot selectively numb your emotions. If you numb the hard things, you numb the great things. And one of the things that I really have learned in my experience with my daughter walking through a terminal illness and her death is that when I became willing to feel the low lows, it increased my capacity to feel the high highs. So it's probably fairly obvious to people that nobody likes to witness somebody at the moments of, intense rage or anger or whatever. But it is also, I believe, equally true that people feel uncomfortable with somebody expressing ecstatic joy. So this is where, as humans, we need to understand and become familiar with our own emotional state, and to allow ourselves to feel everything that we're feeling. Now, I'm not suggesting that if somebody feels this intense moment of rage that they go out and take it out on somebody, or take it out, throw things around or whatever. But I am saying that those emotions need a place to go. And when we don't allow ourselves to have an outlet for all of the feelings that are completely okay and completely normal. There are no bad emotions. Emotions are just feedback for what we're thinking about and how we're interpreting the events in our lives. If we don't have a place for those to go, our bodies get sick. And so tying back into what you're talking about with hormone health, absolutely. But like you said, it's like understanding what comes before the imbalance of hormones, what comes before these problems with your thyroid, what comes before these panic attacks and anxiety attacks. And I've had my own experience with that, and had the same kind of response of like, well, here's a pill to stop that. And I didn't want to do that, because I wanted to understand what is preceding that, what's leading up to that. And that's where you not only have choice, but you have the ability then to change your life for the better going forward. So this mind-body connection is absolutely imperative. And like you said, self-awareness is the first step to being able to do this. And I want to make sure that I stress this, because sometimes when people hear these things, they feel overcome with shame, because they think, I've gotten myself then into this predicament with hormone imbalance or with an autoimmune disease or whatever. Shame is absolutely, not only is it unnecessary, but it is harmful. It's like a layering on of the difficult things to deal with. So the understanding that all of us are doing the best that we can with the tools that we have. I remember being in I was in a Facebook group for parents who had children with MPS, which is the disease that Annie had. And there was a mom who was saying, it's not uncommon for our children with this disease to have issues with irregular bowel movements and all of these like digestive problems. So this mother was sharing that the doctor had told her, give your child this laxative every single day. And so many people commented below that, oh, don't do that, like do this instead, and you can't do that, that's not good for them long term. And I realized every single comment was this kind of like this shaming of her doing it that way. And I had to pipe up and say, okay, just so you know, you did the best that you could by your child. You did the best that you could with what you know. And now that you know differently, you can do differently. And that also gives us, when we're thinking about how our parents raised us with their own trauma and the trauma that was imparted to us because of their experiences and everything that they were going through as parents and what they experienced as children, et cetera, it helps us have that moment of compassion and empathy and understanding for our parents, to know that they also were doing the best that they could. That doesn't mean that some of the things that they did were okay, but it does help us understand the impact of that and be able to unshame the things that happen to us a bit more and be able to look at them objectively and with empathy.
Exactly. And I think that, we're taught in terms of emotion that, what's very typical, and it's not a judgment, it's just how we've all been taught to parent. And it's like you said, it's like the bad emotions, quote unquote, they shouldn't be seen, they should not be heard. And what are typical things we say? It's like, oh no, now stop that, don't do that, oh no, don't cry, there's no reason to cry, oh no, don't, it's not okay to throw a tantrum, oh no, don't do that. And so we're unconsciously not intending to at all, it's not intentional, but we're telling children those emotions are not okay. It's not okay to express them. It's not okay, because how a child will interpret that is, oh, it's not only not okay to express them, I shouldn't have it. And so, and then you've got on the flip side, especially what's going on, and I would say in the coaching world, and just in the world in general, is what is, I will say it's toxic positivity. And the mindset kind of arena is, nope, it's just, you just have to be positive. Just, and it's kind of done in this way where you're encouraged to just like bypass what's going on with you, that whatever's going on with you, oh, it's really, there's something wrong with you. You're made to feel like there's something wrong with you if you don't feel anything but joy and positivity.
Right. You're not high vibe enough.
Exactly. It's ridiculous. And I think that where I believe we're moving to, at least in my circles, is I'm seeing the shift. Thank goodness. We're kind of moving toward now. I think we're in a place in this world, because I believe, like I kind of hit on, but didn't go into it, is that the world is shifting. The vibration from a spiritual standpoint, the world is shifting. We are in a time of ascension where our vibration's shifting, the earth's vibration is shifting. And we are then, as humans, are being forced to also go with it. And so that's when, when I was saying earlier, is that if your life hasn't fallen apart yet, then things will start to shift for you. And it doesn't mean that everyone's life is going to fall apart, but we're moving toward a place of, we can't pretend anymore. We can't pretend about what we really want. We can't pretend how we really feel. We can't pretend what our purpose is in this world. And so I've heard from so many people, personally and professionally, that people are like, yeah, I just feel like, and I think a lot of it has to do with what's happened in the last few years. Like, my relationship is over. I realized I really didn't want it anymore. I'm losing my friendships. We don't resonate anymore. We don't, quote unquote, vibe anymore. This career doesn't resonate with me anymore. And people are starting to find, wow, things are kind of falling apart in a way, or shifting or changing. And it's because of the energies. And so in terms of emotion, going back to that, that's what emotions are essentially. And so we have been taught to kind of push everything aside, avoid, distract ourselves. We live in a society of distract, 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 and we have lost connection to who we are. And on top of that, to compound it, you're also told, you should feel shame if you get angry. You should feel shame if you feel this. You should feel shame if you're not doing what everyone else thinks you should do. And so then that makes it even harder to really do the things we want to do, feel what we really truly feel. And so I think that it's basically coming down to, can we just stop the BS and just accept that we're human and that our experience is, get back in touch with our humanness and just see it from a different perspective. It's not bad or good. We're just having an experience, and those experiences are meant to happen to help us evolve spiritually. That's what I believe. But if we could just, and what I want to encourage people in my coaching is that we're also taught to avoid these emotions. So when you feel it, like I was saying a second ago, when you feel bad, oh no, you just want to get happy, get happy, get happy, get happy. Because there must be something wrong if you have these difficult emotions, when, like you said earlier, what's so important, what you said is that we don't change from a place of comfort or happiness. We change from pain. Because that's when you have to really face things and you have to make a change, because when you're in pain, you have nowhere to go but to move. You have to move. And that was very true when I was a therapist. So I remember I would tell the teams that I worked with, that I had like 3 teams at one time, is we have to remember that we don't change from a place of comfort. We change from a place of discomfort. So you don't want to be in a place of comfort if you're in an arena where change has to happen. And where was I going with that? So it's just helping people. Part of my goal is to help people just become the objective observer. So when you're feeling emotions, rather than trying to push it away, think positively, which is all we hear. That's all we hear, is to say, no, this emotion's here. It is energy, but it's in my body and moving through me because I'm meant to experience it. What is it telling me? What am I supposed to learn from it? What information can I gather from this feeling? And sit with it and feel it, and ask yourself those questions and let it move through you. Don't shame yourself for having the feeling. Don't feel guilty for having that emotion, and just let it be and let it teach you. And that's really what it's there for. And the sooner you can get into practice of doing that process, it will move out of the body. But like you were saying, if we do all of this avoidance and distracting, and we don't allow ourselves to feel it, whatever it is, all of the emotions, it will make you sick. And I think there's a doctor that I follow on Instagram, I can't think of his name right now, who was talking about that. And for a lot of people that I learned with my thyroid diagnosis is you have your throat chakra there. And so some people, I've learned that they've tried medications for their thyroid, they've tried reducing their stress, like they've tried everything when it comes to the hormone imbalance or the thyroid issue, and nothing has worked. But when they finally get to the energetics, in terms of seeing emotion as energy, and that energy gets stuck literally in the cells of your body. And when they learn that, oh, I wasn't speaking my truth, I've been like holding myself back, I keep my mouth shut, I'm a people pleaser, I never speak my opinion, I just allow people to walk all over me, I never stand up for myself. When they finally realize that's a pattern of behavior that they've been doing, and they start speaking their truth, thyroid heals.
That's so interesting. It's an understanding that our consciousness doesn't exist in our heads. It exists in our bodies. And the understanding that there is communication going on all the time in our bodies. And when I talk about nutrition, when I talk about meditation, when I talk about all of these things to aid the mind-body connection, it's really about, how do I make the communication as effective as possible in all the parts of myself. So some of that is that awareness of what I'm feeling and not stuffing it, not pushing it away, not minimizing it, because that gums up the mind body connection. When it comes to the foods that I eat, I want to be aware of how they make my body feel, because if I'm feeling grumpy or anxious or sluggish or brain fog because of the things that I'm eating, and all of this is individualized, either there cannot be a one eating plan that works for everybody. So it's highly individualized. But if the things that I'm putting into my body are gumming up that connection, if I'm feeling cranky and it's impacting my relationships with other people and impacting my ability to be present with my emotions, okay, then maybe I don't eat those things anymore. But it's this a significant shift in the way that we think about things, where it's not so much about like, how do I get this body under control? How do I make it do the things that I want it to do? How do I make it look the way I want it to look? It's like, no, no, no. How do I integrate my consciousness and my awareness of things on a way that makes everything flow the way that it's supposed to? And all of that is going to impact, like I said before, everything that we have control over is in here, in our bodies, in our brains. That this flow is going to impact the flow in our relationships and in our businesses, with our family and friends, etc. So getting really clear on what that looks like individually is so, so important. And it is difficult because it's work. You know, it's work to do those things, but it's work worth doing, because you're never going to not be with yourself. You know, you're the only person that you're guaranteed to spend the rest of your life with. So I heard this quote today and I was like, I mean, she said it in passing and I was like, hold up, like I need to write that down. It was, if someone's not going to approve or be happy about your life, it better not be you. And it
that.
sounds very
Exactly.
simple, but really it's, you know, many,
True.
many people go through life being unhappy about their lives because they don't want other people to be unhappy about their life. It's like, well,
Exactly.
hold up here. Something's off, because nobody else can climb into your body and your human experience and feel what it feels like to be you. That's an inside
Yes.
job always. Now,
Yeah.
there are a lot of tools that help us to get back into our bodies, to have more integrated health, to have a more free-flowing mind-body connection. Obviously, like therapy is a good one. Meditation, you mentioned, also has been huge for me. Nutrition. I do think that many people neglect the aspect of having good support. So
Yes.
what that means, well, and even this can be a painful transition, as you start to look at the people in your life and realize, okay, who in my life really has an attitude toward me of, I want you to find out what wholeness and aliveness looks like for you, and I want you to get that. Because many people, well, and we're guilty of this too. It's like we like what is familiar. So when people start to change, we just automatically don't like that. It's like,
No, we don't.
this is unpredictable. I need you to be to me exactly how you've always been, because that's also how I identify myself, is by you. And it is a difficult shift to say, okay, like what parts of my identity are just ego? I heard this illustration the other day and I can't stop thinking about it. It's a horse-drawn carriage, and you've got, the horses are your urges, the driver is the ego. And when I say ego, I don't mean, I know that you know this, but I don't mean pride. I mean, ego is the person, the personality that we present to the world. And the driver thinks, yeah, okay, like I'm in charge. He's steering the horses. They're going, going, going. And then suddenly there's a knock on the window. And the passenger says, take a right here. And the driver says, who are you? And the person in the carriage says, don't you know who I am? Like, I own this whole thing. Like, I'm in charge of this. And the person in the carriage is you, your true self, behind the ego, behind the urges. Who is that's really directing traffic? Really, truly. And that only can happen too when there is a real understanding of like who the ego is, and how many times the ego doesn't serve us, because the ego is very driven by survival and by acceptance. The passenger is
Mm-hmm.
driven by authenticity. And
Yes.
many times I've heard, if authenticity or acceptance are both on the table, the thing that will always take precedence is acceptance, because we're
Mhm.
hardwired for our survival, and we have this deep wiring that says if I'm alone, if I'm by myself, I'm dead, and that was
Right.
true at a time, through human evolution, through how things used to be. It's like you really couldn't survive on your own. Those things are not true anymore. We're at a place now where, and I think that we can probably speak to this, as you were saying, there's like this shift happening in the collective consciousness where people are starting to become more interested in things like at the top of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. We're becoming more interested in self-esteem and self-actualization,
Yes.
because the basic needs are being met. Now, I would be curious to know if in underdeveloped countries, if this same kind of shift in consciousness is happening when there still is like such a focus and so much time spent getting those basic needs met. So I do think that, with the dawn of time freedom in industrialized nations, we have the flexibility to start thinking about these things when we didn't before, because we were so concentrating on just having our basic needs met. And that is true for a lot of people, even in industrialized societies, that's like, where's my next paycheck coming from? So it is a privilege for people to be able to think about life in this way that is like, who am I? What do I really want? Being tapped into, universe and source energy or God. And I think for people that don't even, have a belief system that goes into the spiritual realm, that's okay, because it still is what is good for everyone. It's these
Right.
bigger questions about how do I live in an ethical way that supports everybody to have a good life. So I don't think that there has to be this spiritual element, because
Right.
what's true is true whether or not we believe it or not.
Exactly.
We're all
Exactly.
influenced by this reality that we can't see. So it really
Yes.
is, as I talked about how nutrition plans have to be completely individualized, and tools that work for one person won't work for another one. I feel the same way about the way that we talk about spirituality with people. Is like, you still have to find what works for you. There are some people
Exactly.
that are going to find tremendous comfort and a beautiful structure and framework within some type of systematized religion that helps them be able to tap into those things. And so it's not a one size fits all. It's a
Mm.
understanding that all things point to the same truth. So find a way to tap
Right.
into that.
Yes. 100%. And I think that it is very individualized. And so I think for me, at the end of the day, it's really people just sitting with themselves
Mm,
and asking themselves the hard questions. What do I really want? In my heart of hearts, like,
mm.
don't start going down the road of, well, I can't do this, and well, there's this barrier and this option. No,
Mm,
what do you really want, and why are you not moving toward it, and what do you believe stands in your way? And
mm,
so I think a lot of times our obstacles that we believe will stand in the way is our ego protecting us. And because it's all fear-based thinking, are those really obstacles, or those are just excuses because you are afraid to take the steps forward? And
mm,
we usually are afraid because of our self-worth, if we think our capabilities, and like you touched on, will I be accepted? What will people
mm,
think of me? What will people say? And so we have to, and I think we're moving, because I have felt it. And it's that feeling of, especially going into this year, I'm just at that place of, and I feel like it comes from a place of you don't even have any control over it. Like,
mm,
it's almost like I can feel this, like, wanting to just come out of my body, where it's
mm,
like, I don't know how to describe it, but it's like, I just can't pretend anymore. Like, it's painful for me to be something I'm not. Like, I just can't do it anymore. And I'm at a point where it's like, you know what? I'm on the train and it's leaving the station, and I'm going to be who I really need to be and be more true to myself and my calling and what I want to be in this world and who I want to be. And I need my relationships to be transparent and authentic and real and deeply connected. And the train's leaving the station, and you can either get on with me or you can stay at the station. Because I'm done at my age, 55, living for anyone else, doing things for anyone else, doing what's expected of me. And because, like you said, I'm not here to live for everyone else. We're all connected, I believe, in terms of the collective consciousness. But at the same time, we are all here for a purpose. And you have to ask yourself, am I going to keep allowing everyone else to get in the way of my purpose and what I'm here to do and the gifts that I'm here to show and live in my fullest and my most authentic? Or am I going to be true to me and do that? And there was this woman, just this one, this is kind of this woman I was talking to last year, and she was at the time a hairdresser, and this woman came in that she'd never seen before, was never not a client, just came in, and she sat down, and she was in her 80s, and they started talking, and she said, are you married? And she said yes. And she said, well, are you happy in your relationship? And she said no. And she said, well, all I can tell you is I wasn't happy in my relationship either, and I stayed. And it's one of my biggest regrets. And here I am in my 80s, and there's nothing now I can do about it. I was miserable because I didn't take a chance on myself. I didn't listen to my inner knowing. I didn't listen to that voice that said, this is not working for you. And my guess, this isn't part of the story, but I'm guessing that goes back to what we're taught, which is divorce is a failure. Relationships ending is a failure. You're bad because it ended. There's so much shame wrapped up in those things. And I think that we're moving toward, thank goodness, a time where it's like, no, we need to become more authentic, because I think that's what people also want. I think people are kind of inherently done with BS. We're done with fake. We're done with lies. We're done with the fake kind of way we've been living. And people are really, I just feel that we're all at a place in life where we're just done with all of that. And we really are moving toward a time where people truly are just, I don't know if I'd say desperate, but we can feel it in our bodies where we're like, we just want to be living in our truth. We all deeply desire not fake relationships, but deeply connected relationships where I have people in my life who see me for really who I am, and they accept me for who I am, and we're deeply connected, and it's not just the surface level stuff. Same with your careers, living in our purpose, having true connected relationships, and all of those things. I think that that's inherently what we're feeling. And I believe that all of that encompasses the mind body. And coming back to too, like the nutrition's important, which absolutely affects your mood, which affects your relationships, which affects all of those things. But it's also remembering that this body is a vessel and that we have to respect it. And in order to be in a place of, whatever your beliefs are, the spiritual realm, or however you get information and how you're connected to the larger grand scheme of things, you have to be treating your vessel with respect. And it's all connected.
So to play devil's advocate a little bit here, because I have heard this from people, it's this belief that if all of us lived in a way that was so directed towards doing the things that we really want to do, that there would be mass chaos. Like there would be, like that people would do bad things. And I think that it is worth acknowledging that there are some people who have been so traumatized or have had experiences that have shaped them in a way that it's not safe really for them to act out the things that they really want to do.
Mhm.
Now, and being I imagine that being a therapist for a long time, you probably understand the need for boundaries for people that have those type of proclivities. So, we could point to the men and women who have done atrocious things throughout history and understand that it's important to put boundaries around them to not allow them to do the things that they really want to do.
Mhm.
And so I guess I'm wondering, how do you talk to people about this idea of being authentically yourself when maybe some people have fears about being their authentic selves because they haven't built up that trust muscle yet, and also that there are some people that shouldn't be true to, I guess I would say it like this, that I know that underneath all the layers of trauma and all the layers of programming and subconscious patterns that perpetuate pain for other people and for themselves, is that I do believe at the core of every human is that pure authentic self.
Yes.
But there are
Yes.
some people who will never be able to realize that because of the layers of trauma and programming that prevent them from really truly connecting with
Yes.
that.
Yes. Yes. And the way that I see it is that I'm very simple when it comes to this. And it's, you're either going to live your life through the lens of shame and I'm bad and buying into all the stuff that you were told and the programming, as I would call it, that is in the world right now, or you're going to break out of that and realize who you really are. Because
Mm,
I believe that when we are living in our true authentic selves to who we truly are, first you got to know who that is and you have to understand who that is, and that's reconnecting with yourself. And one example is through meditation. So what I tell people with meditation is a very simple example, is that when you are sitting in meditation, and because a lot of people think that meditation is meant to get rid of your thoughts. No, it's not meant to
mm,
get rid of your thoughts. It's meant for you to be is it's meant for you to, how do I want to say this? It's meant for you to be the observer of your thoughts. So you learn how to not allow your thoughts to control you,
mm,
to run away with your thoughts, which are typically not great thoughts. And it's in those moments of meditation, and why you want to stay present and focused on your breath or focused on one focal point through meditation, is as you practice meditation, starting to create that awareness of, oh, there's that thought, and not allow yourself to run away with it, but
mm,
come back to your breath. And then when you do that over and over again, you start to realize, well, who is that person who's observing the thought I just had, and had the awareness to say, there's that thought, you're running away with it, come back.
mm,
That's who you are at the end of the day. The I am, the soul, the spirit, whatever you want to call it, your consciousness, that's who we are. And I think that you're right. So many people are so controlled and have so many layers of trauma that they can't even see through the forest through the trees, because they believe all of those stories of their past
mm,
trauma. I'm damaged goods, I'm a bad person. And then what ends up happening is that if that is truly your belief of who you are, then you are going to cause pain to everyone around you.
mm,
You're going to project it to everyone. You're going to get highly triggered. And when you are triggered, and if you are not, excuse me, if you have not, sorry, if you have not come to that realization, and you are living very unconsciously and unaware of this process, then when you are triggered, you're going to blame everyone else. You're going to say,
mm,
oh, you did this to me, you did this to me, because your trauma is triggered. But if you are living, understanding that that is not who you are,
mm,
then you're going to understand when you are triggered, oh, my trauma is getting triggered. What is that about for me?
mm,
Okay, I need to look at that. Where's this trigger coming from? And then you take more responsibility, and responsibility has become a dirty word, which is strange to me. And responsibility is really just being able to objectively look at yourself without shame, without judging yourself. There's no judgment. It's just going, okay, I got triggered. I'm feeling this emotion. What is that about for me? What is it connected to? What's happened in my past that's causing this emotion? And just kind of owning it for yourself and being able to, without judgment, don't judge yourself. Just go, what is that connected to? Is there a pattern here? And then you can start to see the patterns in your life, which brings the awareness. And then when you become aware, now you have this awareness, and you're living more in a conscious way, where now you can make a different choice. But yeah, I believe that aside from that, there are people who, unfortunately, the way that they express trauma is doing very ugly, not so great things to other people. And unfortunately, may never in this lifetime be able to get to a place to be aware of who they really are and do the work. And they will have to have those boundaries. But I think for most people, it's really making that shift. And I think, to me, living a more authentic life is really learning first that you are who are you really, and why are you really here, and moving toward that. So, someone I follow on Instagram is Feel Good, and he often talks about, obviously, like Eckhart Tolle talks about, living in the present. And that's really what we need to start doing, is living more in the present. And that's where you will find more your authenticity and who you really are, moment by moment by moment, because we tend to be, as humans, ruled by the past, and we focus on the past, and that's where our despair and sadness and grief comes from. Or we're living in the future all the time. What's coming next? And that's where the anxiety comes from. But if we can stay in the present, then that's where we find more gratitude. That's where we find more love, more forgiveness, because we're cherishing that this moment is really all that we have. And that's where you can understand that if that's really all that you have, it's a game changer. But it's difficult to do in this process.
It's very difficult to do. And you're exactly right. The past only exists in our memories, which we know from psychology, from neuroscience, that our memories are never accurate, never ever.
Right.
So that's not even reality. And the future is unpredictable, uncontrollable, and only lives in our imaginations, only ever lives in our imaginations. So the only reality that truly exists is right now,
Right.
now. And what this isn't is an admonition for people to never look at the past and never imagine the future. It's really to understand the flow of how all of this works and how all of this impacts the way that we perceive the world now. So we're bumping up against the end of our time, but before we go, I want people to know where they can go to find you. Of course, we'll have all of this in the show notes so that people are able to get onto your website and Instagram, etc. But what one thing do you want people to leave with when it comes to understanding where they can find out more about you or how to work with you?
They can find me at shannoneswanson.com, and you will find there all about me. You can read more about me and my offerings. So I offer private one-on-one coaching. You can do one-off sessions with me, or I recently am changing a three-month package where we can work together. And the way that I look at it is because of my experience as a therapist and a health coach. First of all, I always tell people, this is not therapy. You're not signing up for therapy. I'm not doing therapy. It's more coaching. But I weave all of those skills together. So we can talk about nutrition, we can talk about hormones, we can talk spirituality, we can talk about, your goals in life, challenges, obstacles, whatever it is. There's no limit to it. It's really meeting you where you're at and what are your needs and how can I serve you. I also have my membership where I talk a lot about this and delve into it. And you can find me on Instagram at Shannon E. Swanson. And you can find me there.
Shannon, thank you so much for sharing your expertise with us and being so willing to talk about how all of these things feel, because it's one thing for someone, especially who has expertise in an area, to come in and talk about, here are the 1, 2, 3, 4 steps to do this, or like the science behind it or whatever. But it's another thing for people to be able to connect with you because they think, oh yeah, I felt that before too. So thank you so much for your willingness to be honest about how you feel. And it's very obvious to me that that the work that you want to do in the world is so deeply true to who you are, because it's infused in everything that you talk about. And that's such a gift for you to share so openly what you've gone through, and also be able to say with such certainty and clarity to other people, like, come along. This is so fun. This is, as much pain as there is in the shifting and the changing. It's like, once you've tasted that, you can't go back, and you wouldn't want to, because in here is like, it's like an explosion of understanding of what the human experience is and how extraordinary it is. So thank you again for being with us today. And before I go, everybody remember, P.S. we expire.